Hi. In Acts 13, did you notice that among the disciples and teachers listed in the church in Antioch were Saul, who was a former persecutor of Christians, and Manaen, who was an associate of Herod Antipas, who killed John the Baptist. And the Holy Spirit chose Saul for a special mission, for special work. And this just made me realize that no matter what your past is, right, God will use you for his plan and his purpose. So the disciples or the leaders of the church in Antioch weren't necessarily all good people with sterling pasts. And I found that quite comforting. In Cyprus, we see for the first time that Saul is officially called Paul. Now, apparently, his name is Paul in Gentile speak, quote unquote, perhaps maybe Greek or whatever, and then is Saul in Jewish. So obviously by this time he had transitioned into the Gentile territory, and so he was being called his Gentile name, Paul. He was so filled with the Holy Spirit that he was able to identify Elymas, the sorcerer, for who he was. And I thought that was actually very significant. Paul's message when he got to Pisidian Antioch was summarized as this: the law isn't where your hope lies, Christ is. But more than the message was the fact that more Gentiles were accepting Paul's message, and that didn't sit well with the Jews. They became very jealous and stirred up persecution against Paul and Barnabas, so much so that they had to leave the region. Now, the division brought by their message was consistent in all the places that they visited on this missionary journey. In Iconium, it was interesting to see that the Jews and the Gentiles, who ordinarily did not get along, actually united in a plot to stone them, but obviously they fled. And then in Lystra and Derbe, after healing the crippled man, the people decided that they were gods and wanted to worship them and offer sacrifices. Now that was funny, but then it also showed me how eager the people were for something to believe in, something to attribute the good the good that they were experiencing in life. But clearly they didn't understand, and Paul tried to explain it all to them, but they still didn't get it, that it was God that was responsible through them and not them doing the miracles. But what was even more interesting is that the people who had followed them from all the towns they had visited ended up in Derbe, or Lystra and Derbe, right? And they incited the people there to stone Paul. Now, it was funny. He went from almost being worshipped and sacrificed as a god to being stoned half to death just because of these Jewish people who were following them and inciting persecution everywhere they went. Now, when he was, they had dragged him outside the city, I believe that the disciples gathering around him was actually quite significant for his healing. And I think, just like I said yesterday, it had something to do with their fervent prayer. Now, once he was healed, he went back into the town. Now, that's weird. Like a town where they almost killed you and stoned you half to death, he went back into the town. That was very curious, right, at first. But now I understood that he needed to strengthen the disciples in that town. After going through what he went through, he realized that it was not easy for them, because he got stoned for preaching something that he believed in without failing. And these were disciples who were based in that town, who knew their work and their job and their mission was to keep preaching Christ. So he recognized that their path wasn't going to be easy, and he went in to strengthen them. Now here's my hashtag, getting to know God lesson. God pours out his kindness even to people who reject him. He gives common grace to all. Now, Paul explained this to the people in Lystra and Derbe when they saw the mighty acts through he and Peter, but they didn't understand that the worship did not belong to them but belonged to God. All this was in chapter 14, verses 10 to 17. But then God uses his kindness and grace to make his name known even amongst his enemies. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you've learned something new and amazing about God, as we should every day. That's, after all, the whole point of this journey. And I look forward to sharing more with you tomorrow. Thank you for joining me. Have a good day. Bye.